Peter, we've learnt over the last couple of days that the USA and Russia will be signing a new arms control treaty in April. Isn't this good news?
It's very good news, and it represents a concrete step towards disarmament, but it's only part of the story, because at the same time the US government has announced big increases in its spending on nuclear weapons. So what we're seeing is mixed, contradictory messages coming out of the Obama administration.
What are your concerns about the new START treaty?
Well, the START treaty itself only delivers modest decreases in the number of nuclear weapons which are deployed. I think each side has committed to reduce the number of its warheads from 2,200 to just over 1,500. There's a 7-year timescale for meeting this target, so quite a long time, and it doesn't apply to the much larger numbers of nuclear weapons that each side has in its stockpiles in reserve.
Tell us more about the increases in spending on the US nuclear weapons.
Well, the Obama administration has just published its budget for the 2011 financial year, and in that budget there are large increases in expenditure for the American National Nuclear Security Administration. The administration this year is going to get an increase of nearly 10% in its spending, and there's going to be further increases over the next 5 years as well. And by the end of that period, an extra $5 billion will have been spent on the American nuclear infrastructure and administration. And that's in the context of a budget which is really playing out unprecedented increases in spending for the military, and is going to allow the military to buy the equipment it needs to transform the American armed forces over the next 2 decades.
Could you tell us more about what this money is going to be spent
A lot of the money has been earmarked for stockpile management programs, which basically means keeping the US's nuclear warheads safe and secure and reliable. But within that stockpile management allocation, there's also a requirement for the administration to be able to design and develop new nuclear weapons. There's also money allocated for building new nuclear infrastructure, specifically a new uranium processing facility at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, and also for a new factory at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which will be able to produce new plutonium pits for nuclear weapons. What I think we're seeing is that instead of following the line that the Bush administration took of trying to build a brand new nuclear warhead, the Reliable Replacement Warhead, the American National Nuclear Security Administration is now taking a much stealthier approach and is trying to increase the capacity, the capability of nuclear weapons through a series of life extension programs and upgrade programs, rather than a program for a new weapon.
And why is the Obama administration increasing spending on nuclear weapons in this way?
Well, Vice President Biden recently outlined the logic behind the administration's thinking, and his explanation was that the USA in due course would like to see much deeper cuts in warhead numbers, but before they feel confident to make those cuts, they want to be absolutely sure that they can rely on the smaller numbers of nuclear weapons that would remain. So the smaller numbers that remain have to be absolutely guaranteed, absolutely reliable to do the job that they're supposed to do. I think as well as that, there's an element that the Obama administration wants to win over some of the more conservative politicians in the US to support its arms control agenda. The problem is, the risk is though, that some of the hardline sceptics probably will never be won over, and at the same time the President is risking compromising international support for his agenda.
Isn't this a big disappointment after Obama's speech in Prague last year, when he promised to take steps towards his vision of a world without nuclear weapons?
Well, Obama's Prague speech was always much more about preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons around the world than it was about steps towards disarmament that the USA would take. But yes, there is a risk that the President will not deliver on some of his promises. For example, he made a very clear campaign promise not to develop new nuclear weapons. In Prague, he also said that he would allow America to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. It doesn't look likely that that's going to happen in the short to medium term future. So again, the danger is that President Obama will not be seen to do enough to encourage other nations around the world to live up to their non-proliferation commitments.
Does this mean that the President's arms control agenda has come off the track?
I don't think it means it's come off the track, but it does mean that those of us who are in favour of nuclear disarmament will have to work much harder and support the President in meeting that agenda. And this is something that European governments can play a very helpful role in doing. European governments should be saying to the President, we don't need US nuclear weapons to be deployed in Europe anymore. The Cold War is over, so these weapons have no military purpose anymore. The British government could also play a very helpful role. British politicians should be saying to their American counterparts, it's in the interests of global safety, global security, for America to take steps towards nuclear disarmament. We think this is something that would be really helpful, and we think this is something that we want America to do. The British government could also match what America and Russia have done in cutting warhead numbers. If the government was to say, okay, we will make a proportionate cut to the size of the cut which America and Russia have agreed to under the START Treaty, that would be a really helpful sign that would send out a very clear message that the British government is supporting American efforts on disarmament. It would be a very helpful step, for example, before the forthcoming Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference in New York. That would put the conference on the way to a very successful conclusion, I think.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.